Hey everyone, Dave with the Spill Proof Podcast. Just want to let you know we are still going to be posting our podcast episodes up on our YouTube channel, but we're going to be doing it a little bit differently. Instead of putting the full episode on there, what we're going to do is put small snippets of it, maybe some of the highlights, things like that. And then if you like what you heard, you can check us out where our podcast can be found. So right now, our podcast can be found at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and Pandora. So if you like what you heard, check us out, Spill Proof Podcast. You can write to us at spillproofpodcast@gmail. We love to hear your feedback or throw some stuff in the comments. Thanks, and thanks for listening. So we're talking about postpartum depression, and obviously postpartum depression, the majority, if not most of the time or all the time, affects the
mom.
Mm-hmm. So I wanted to do a little bit of research because obviously we as a family, like Becky said, we've gone through this. Men can have it too, but generally it's the mom that goes through that, and everyone else is the support system. But I wanted to do a little bit of research and just kind of see how big is this? You know, how widespread? I don't know that people generally talk about it, and apparently statistically that is true.
Mm-hmm.
So out of 4 million live births in the U.S., 1 out of 7 women end up getting postpartum depression.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. That's actually 600,000 women in the U.S. every year for live births.
And it's kind of crazy that, like, it's only just starting to become something that we're talking about more.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you think, like, this is not new. Like, it didn't happen or start to become a thing in the last couple years. Like, this has always been something that women and families and like you said, men are going through, but it's just something that wasn't really talked about. And that, to me, I feel like is really sad because it is really normal. Like, it's okay if you're going through it. Okay in the sense that, like, a lot of other people are going through it, and there should just be more resources readily available for families and women and men who are going through this. That's just such a big number to, like, I feel like maybe the last decade it's been talked about more.
You know, it's funny that you say that. Some of the other research that I found, it does say that 50% of the women or people who have postpartum depression, they don't tell anybody. That's 300,000 people in the U.S. every year. Just go without telling anybody that they're going through it. 600,000 people, that's more common than breast cancer. It's a huge number. 50% of the people affected by that don't tell anybody, and they suffer through it, feeling alone.
And I'll go into this more, but like I get why more people don't talk about it or want to talk about it, and I'll go through what my experience was, but like part of me gets that. But it also, like, I want to be part of this movement that's like, it's okay if you're going through it. Like, it's not the end all be all. Like, you can get past this. But yeah, I do get why people don't want to share, but I think my biggest takeaway for everyone is share with someone. Tell somebody. Doesn't matter who it is. Could be your spouse, could be your mom, your mother-in-law, a friend, a trusted coworker, your boss. Like, tell one person that you're feeling this way, and I think it can get better.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because one of the best things, from what I looked up, that you can do is just talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, talk to somebody, talk to your parent, talk to your significant other, whoever it might be. Probably don't talk to the baby because they're not really going to listen, but
if it helps, like if that's your first step, right? Like if your first step is to tell the baby like, hey, mommy's not feeling great, and that helps you open up, then do it. Like whatever's going to make you feel comfortable. But yeah, like tell someone you trust for sure.
Yeah. And it's interesting because only 15% ever go to see a therapist. Again, it doesn't have to be a therapist, but just going to talk to somebody. Even just
only
a couple.
15%.
Only 15% go to see a therapist. And the studies show that even just a few sessions with a therapist make a huge difference, an absolutely huge difference. And, whether it's full blown postpartum depression or just, the baby blues, which is interesting. The baby blues affects 70 to 80% of parents, which is a lot.
Most.
Yeah, that's
of us.
basically everybody.
Yeah, most parents.
At some point in time, whether it's, not feeling like that instant bond when you have a child or just that overwhelming feeling of being overwhelmed. It can be a lot. And some studies say that it happens to be the season. Whether it's winter when you have the baby and you're cooped up inside, or if it's summer and you're able to, go outside and do stuff and socialize. And
I would
with COVID
be interested. Yeah. Speaking of COVID, I would be interested to know if the number of moms who have postpartum depression has increased since COVID has hit, because like you're not going out more, and like you're you just had a baby. You're probably not going to have like any type of gathering at your home with a newborn at home with COVID going on, and now with Delta spiking and everything. So it'll be interesting over the next few years, honestly, to see if postpartum depression is on the rise. And I think the takeaway from that is like there are other factors that go into it. It's not just you. So if you're out there thinking, what's wrong with me? Why do I have postpartum depression? It's not you. It's not you. There are so many factors that go into it. Gosh, I'm already tearing up.
It's okay.
This is going to happen many times. But it's not you. It's a combination of factors and hormones and things you can control, things you cannot control that go into this. And it's okay. A lot of women go through it and a lot of people aren't talking about it. So be that brave, take that brave step and tell someone that you're going through this.
I think that's very well put.
Whew.
Are you okay?
Yep.
No. All right.
So, I think what we're going to do is we're going to talk through kind of what my experience personally for me was, like just what I felt was. And then we're going to talk through what Dave experienced, because we co-parent. We're not single parents. We co-parent together. We are very much in this together. And I know not everyone's in that situation, but that's our experience. So I want to give my experience with postpartum depression. And then I want to give, I want Dave to tell his experience with it, because I think like a lot of dads too, like they may not know like what to do in this situation, or like maybe like the signs of it or things. So I'd really love to get Dave's perspective, and then we'll talk through what we did about it when we realized I was going through it. All right.
Okay.
Yes, I'm going to be okay.
All right.
So we are going to dive into my experience, I guess, what I kind of felt and how we came to the realization that I was in fact having and experiencing postpartum depression. So I really think it hit pretty soon after Owen was born. And one thing I think everyone should know is in doing research for this, postpartum postpartum depression can happen while you're pregnant, like up to a year after your baby is born. And I really think probably after like your baby is adopted or like any situation like that. If you're fostering kids or whatever it may be, like if that's a new situation in your life, I think like postpartum depression can happen. But
yeah, what you're saying is that you don't necessarily have to have the baby to have postpartum depression.
Experienced it. Yeah. For me, I do feel like it happened like pretty quick after Owen was born. I feel like I bonded with him, and I like always felt like I loved him, but I also thought that like things would come a lot more naturally than they did. Gosh, the tears are already starting. And this is like, it's crazy because Owen's like 2.5, and just thinking back to how I felt during this time is I didn't think it was so raw as it is, and I've gotten over it. And as we'll talk about, we like I went to therapy, and we'll talk about that, but I was not expecting these emotions to still be as raw as they were. And I think like even though you've gotten through something and worked past it, and like thinking back to that time when you did feel so low, it's like hard to go back there.
Which just shows how real it actually is.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that you've made it past it, it can snap back pretty quick.
Yeah.
Those feelings.
Yeah. So, and I've talked about this before, but I think my trigger was having to pump for Owen, and I really thought that being a mom was gonna come so natural. I thought I was going to be able to breastfeed. I thought I was going to know like, oh, this is his I'm hungry cry. This is his I'm tired cry. This is his I'm bored cry. I didn't know what the heck I was doing.
It was our first kid.
Yeah, I didn't know what the different cries meant. I couldn't breastfeed him. He wouldn't latch, and I was pumping, and I hated pumping. I hated it. You guys know this. If you've listened to our podcast, bottled breasts and SNS, I hated pumping. And I do think that was a trigger for it, but what that really led into was me second guessing myself as a mother. I remember like any decision we had to make regarding Owen's well-being, I felt paralyzed. Like I wasn't good enough to be his mom. And I remember kind of leaning on Dave a lot to be like, well, what do you think we should do? Or like, you tell me what to do, because I felt like if I made the decision, it was going to be the wrong one. I also had this, thought that like if we lived in sounds so stupid to say out loud, but this is really like what consumed a lot of my thoughts for a long time.
It'll bring us to the mindset. I think it's good to hear it.
Yeah, I thought that if we lived in caveman times, I wouldn't be able to provide for my child because I had a C-section and he wouldn't latch. And so I had to use like quote unquote modern means to bring him into the world and keep him alive with breast milk. Which, as I'm saying it, sounds so stupid, because if we didn't have successful C-sections, like we would lose way more kids.
Well, and if we didn't have a C-section, we wouldn't have a kid.
Exactly. Yeah, like we wouldn't have
If you haven't
Owen.
listened to that episode, it's episode 11, our birthing story. Go listen to that and you'll know.
And if we didn't have formula in the world for moms who can't produce milk, or like breastfeeding is so freaking hard. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's just too much for a mom.
And there's nothing wrong with formula.
There's nothing wrong with formula.
Formula is exactly
the same.
Formula
saves lives.
As long as as long as you have good clean water for the formula, it's the exact same thing. All
Yeah.
the nutrients is in there, all the vitamins. It's just they're just little bits of things. That's all it is. As
Yeah.
long as you have good clean water, it's perfectly fine.
Exactly. Like there's nothing wrong with formula. Both of our kids have had formula. Both of our kids have had breast milk, and both of our kids have had formula. But I kept getting stuck on this thought that if I had had these kids in caveman times, we wouldn't make it. And that that made me feel like an utter failure. And I just felt really inadequate. I also felt that Owen didn't love me. I loved him, but I thought that he could pick up on the fact that I wasn't an adequate mom. And this was kind of my turning point to let somebody know that I really needed help, but I thought that this was God's way of telling me that I shouldn't be a mom.
Thanks for listening to the snippet of this episode. Full episodes can be found on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and Pandora. As always, we love feedback. Throw it in the comments or write to us at spillproofpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.